General Mili, pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Freddie. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
How long before you retire as chairman of the Joint Chiefs?
Just a couple weeks now. I retired by law at midnight on the 30th, and so what is that, 18, 19 days, something like that.
And then what's the first thing you're going to do?
Well, my wife and I will move out of our set of quarters on Fort Myer. Then I intend to sleep, get rid of the bags under the eyes, and be the best grandfather I can be.
All right, let's jump right into it. A lot of people on the Ukrainian side that I talked to last week when I was in Kyiv say, we don't understand. We asked for these weapons, let's say HIMARS, and the West or the United States says no, 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 and then finally gives them to us. But it's now 8 months or 9 months later. We feel like the same thing is happening with ATACMS, the same thing is happening with F-16s. If you're going to give them to us, why not give them to us fast?
Well, I think, over the period of time, we have given them a considerable amount of military aid, about $40 billion worth so far. And there's over $100 billion in total aid, if you include monetary and humanitarian aid. So that's just the United States. The United States has been extraordinarily generous with
No,
the
it has,
Ukrainian
but
people.
the question is, if you want them to win,
well, yeah, and the speed.
Why not do it fast?
Yeah, so the question is the speed. There's mechanical issues there in terms of how fast you can marshal this equipment and how fast you can get it across the lines of communication from adjacent countries, and then how fast they can absorb it. So it's not just sprinkle magic dust and the stuff starts showing up. The other thing is need. So at the beginning of this war, the greatest need was for anti-armor weapons, for example, to stop the Russian offensive, and that's what they got. And then as they shifted into what the current operation is, their need were tanks, Bradleys, Leopards, Gepards, those sorts of mechanized and armored vehicles of various types. And the West was very generous in providing those. And then you have to have the training to go along with them and spare parts, the munitions that go with those things. So all of that does take a period of time to do. It's not a question of, it just all shows up at once.
What do you think of the current state of the counteroffensive? Do you think the Ukrainians are now beginning to push the Russians out of cities and towns?
Well, I think they've been doing it pretty consistently, actually, since last summer. The winter was a lot of fighting, but not a lot of movement. And then this offensive, although slower than the planners had anticipated, it has been steady. And they have made steady progress through these various defensive belts. And they have fought hard up in Bakhmut. They fought down in Donetsk. And of course, they're fighting down in the vicinity of Zaporizhzhia and down towards Melitopol and Mariupol and all that. So it has been steady progress. What I said months ago was it was going to be long, hard, bloody, because the nature of this particular fight and the type of defense that the Russians put in and the capabilities of the Ukrainians augured for a very, very difficult, long, tough fight. But the Ukrainians have been doing that. They have a lot of combat power remaining. The Ukrainians are not a spent force. And there's sufficient weather that allows them to continue to achieve their steady progress. They have not failed. I know there's some commentary out there that somehow this offensive has failed. It hasn't failed. It's at least achieved partial success. They're already through several of these belts, and they've got time left. So we'll see where it goes. But the Ukrainians have demonstrated an incredible ability of courage, resilience, toughness, and they are slowly but steadily working the way through some very, very difficult Russian defenses.
So a realistic goal that many believe the Ukrainians should have is essentially to gain access to the Sea of Azov, go down south, Mariupol, that area, so that it frees up Odessa as the port they can then start freely exporting all their grain from. You believe that's doable?
Well, we'll see. I think it's. I wouldn't want to make a prediction on that just yet. We'll see what happens. Again, there's well over 200,000 Russian troops in Russian-occupied Ukraine. This offensive, although significant, has operational and tactical objectives that are limited in the sense that they do not, even if they are fully achieved, they don't completely kick out all the Russians, which is the broader strategic objective that President Zelensky had. That's going to take a long time to do that. That's going to be a very significant effort over a considerable amount of time. I don't want to put a time on it because a lot of things can happen in a war that's action, reaction, counteraction. You could see a general collapse. You could see escalation. You could see a lot of different things happen in the future. But I can tell you that it'll take a considerable length of time to militarily eject all 200,000 or plus Russian troops out of Russian-occupied Ukraine. That's a very high bar. It's going to take a long time to do it.
There's a specific accusation about you made by the former president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and he says that there is this 4-page memo on attack plan to attack for the United States to attack Iran. Trump himself has talked about this. This is the famous classified document that he was waving around. But Meadows makes the accusation that you were pressing President Trump to attack Iran. There are other reports that say, in fact, it was Trump who was pressing you. What is the accurate statement here?
Well, Freddie, look at it. It'd be very inappropriate for me to comment on anything that's under a current federal investigation, so I won't. But let me just say this. As the chairman or any member of the Joint Chiefs, our job is to render advice. We have plans for all kinds of things. And when we render advice, typically we say course of action 1, 2, or 3. We talk about the costs and the risks, and we make recommendations. And I can assure you that not one time have I ever recommended to attack Iran.
What'd you make of that pushback, Fareed?
I thought it was striking. In fact, I thought he went a little beyond what he said he was going to go. He said, "I'm not going to comment on this," but it clearly annoyed him enough that he decided to comment on it anyway. And as far as I could tell, that was pretty definitive. Trump has repeatedly claimed, as you say, in those conversations he had with people who had no security clearances, that the Joint Chiefs, that Mili particularly, were pressing him to attack, that this was an attack plan for Iran. Mark Meadows writes that in the prologue of his memoirs, and he gives it pride of place. It is the opening statement of the president's chief of staff. And Mili says definitively that did not happen. It's worth noting that he's right. Mili is right when he says they have attack plans for everything. The United States surely has plans to all kinds of contingencies. But he was pretty definitive that he at no point ever recommended that the United States launch an invasion of Iran.